and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
A very good morning to you. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. To begin the news, here's a look at the lead stories. One of the unions representing the Guyana Power and Light workers has asked the Labour Ministry to intervene in a pay dispute. The president says the government and the private sector will be hammering out a strategy to cope with rising cost of living. And in regional news, Barbadians who are COVID positive and are isolated at home will not be allowed to vote in general elections this month. And for the international news, we'll bring you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. The union that's representing some workers at the Guyana Power and Light, GPL, has asked the Ministry of Labour to intervene in a pay dispute. In a letter dated December 23rd, the General Secretary of the National Association of Agricultural, Commercial and Industrial Employees, NASI, Karen Mapp, asked the Chief Labour Officer of the Ministry of Labour, Danishwar Dionarine, for conciliation. Ms. Mapp asked Mr. Dionarine to intervene and have a speedy conciliation process to alleviate any difference between the union and GPL. Meanwhile, the NASI General Secretary wants the Chief Executive Officer of GPL, Bart Dindiel, to withdraw his statements that the power company does not have any money to pay increased wages and salaries. The union wants GPL to use the approximately $4 billion from the government to pay the workers. NASI claims that the GPL's CEO has ignored any instruction by the Guyana government to pay the 7% increase, the same as has been paid to other categories of government workers. The union further claims that Mr. Dindiel wants to instead pay a 2 to 4% increase. Police are continuing their investigations into Saturday's fire at the Georgetown Public Hospital Heart Diagnosis Facility. An echocardiography machine and related equipment have been destroyed. Chief Executive Officer of the Georgetown Public Hospital, Robbie Rambaran, estimates the loss at $25 million. He says smoke quickly spread to the intensive care unit and cardiac intensive care unit where patients were admitted. Mr. Rambaran says 4 patients from the ICU and 7 from CICU were evacuated to the recovery room in the main operating theater and the ophthalmology ward. This is the 5th such fire for in recent months at government-owned facilities. There have been fires at the Mabaruma Secondary School, North Rheinveld Multilateral School, Brickdam Police Station, including A Division Headquarters, and the building housing the Director of Public Prosecutions Chambers and the Office of Professional Responsibility. President Ali says the government and the private sector will be tackling the steadily rising cost of living. In his New Year's message, he says that due to COVID-19, the international cost of shipping has increased from $2,000 at the beginning of 2021 to $20,000 by the end of 2021. He says this is disturbing his government's development plans, but efforts are underway to work with Guyana's business community to cushion the impact of rising prices.
Tackling this issue requires new and creative measures, which my government has either started to put in place or in the process of implementing. I do not promise that we can solve all aspects of the problem alone. It is a global challenge, but I do pledge this: my government will lose no time in seeking ways to ease the strain on the people of Guyana. In collaboration with the private sector, we will roll out strategies early in the new year to alleviate the problem as best we can.
But leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton, says that the rising cost of living is due to economic mismanagement.
Guyanese have been asked to brace themselves for harder times in 2022. This is clearly a result of the incompetence of the government. The Guyanese economy is becoming increasingly dependent on oil, notwithstanding all the talk about diversification. Already, oil is accounting for 43% of export earnings. The dreaded Dutch disease is increasingly evident, reflecting in high prices for goods and services across all sectors.
Leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton. He made no mention of the global increase in prices due to the COVID-19's impact of a slowdown of the international supply chain. The Ministry of Health is reporting a continued spike in the number of new daily cases of the coronavirus, but the number of deaths remains very low. Latest figures show that there are 281 new cases. Overall, there are 1,338 active cases, with 41 persons hospitalized and 1,297 ordered to isolate themselves at home to avoid spreading the coronavirus. 5 of those hospitalized are seriously sick and are in the intensive care unit. 4 others are quarantined to see if they will develop symptoms of the disease. The death toll has increased to 1,055, with the passing of a 79-year-old woman who was not vaccinated and lived in Region 6, East Berbice quarantine. The Health Ministry says since the start of the pandemic in March 2020, 37,708 persons have recovered. So far, 40,060 persons have been infected with COVID-19. A Venezuelan man who allegedly killed another Venezuelan man at Aral Mountaintop, Cayuni, has been arrested. He was taken to the Bartica police station overnight for investigators to question him about the alleged murder of 51-year-old Animal Sanja of Valencia, Venezuela. The suspect allegedly lashed Sanja to his head with a piece of wood during the pre-dawn hours of January 1st. Investigators were informed that Sanja and the suspect, who are known to each other, were arguing over the suspect allegedly owing Sanja some raw gold. At the time of the incident, police say that the suspect and Sanja were at the suspect's sister's camp. The suspect's sister and her husband are also in police custody, assisting with investigations. 2 Essequibo Coast youths have been arrested in connection with the robbery and wounding of a businessman and his wife at Charity Waterfront. Police say that the men, who are 21 and 25 years old, were caught in the backlands between Dartmouth and New Road after a 5-hour-long search. Police say that they recovered $4.8 million and $1.1 million worth of Digicel and GTT phone cards. According to investigators, after the businessman freed himself, having been tied up, he chased and chopped one of the bandits, and then police and the community police cordoned off the backlands. The businessman, who was chopped in his head by the other bandit, was rushed to the Charity Hospital, from where he was transferred to the Saudi Hospital where he was hospitalized in stable condition, police added. The businessman, who is 55 years old, told police that at about 11 o'clock Saturday morning, he was about to open his business place when the two suspects, who were armed with a cutlass and knife, pushed the door and entered. He further recalled that the one with the knife held him up and placed the knife to his throat, while the other suspect attacked the victim's 57-year-old wife. Police were informed that the bandits covered her mouth, after which they taped both of their hands and feet with duct tape. The men then reportedly ransacked the premises and carted off the cash and phone cards. And now in regional news. COVID-positive Barbadians in isolation will not be allowed to vote. Barbadians are due to vote for a government of their choice on January 19th. Head of the COVID-19 monitoring unit, Ronald Chapman, says persons at any of Barbados' isolation facilities will not be allowed to vote, as those facilities are considered extensions of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Asked specifically if he said isolated COVID-positive persons would not be able to vote, he said,
"That is quite correct. If you're positive, you stay at home. Don't you looking surprised. If you are ill in the hospital, you stay in the hospital." We're asking Barbadians, please, if you know you are ill, if you know you are infectious, please do not come out and share that infection with others.
Nomination day is today. However, Electoral and Boundaries Commission member Sir Hal Gollop says legal advice should be sought.
I think it goes much further than just passing off a definitive statement that it cannot be done because of this and because of that. I believe that is certainly outside Mr. Chapman's competence, because it has an impact on law, and I think it would be wiser to have an opinion on this, so that the position of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission can be based on a solid legal opinion rather than that of Mr. Chapman.
Electoral and Boundaries Commission member Sir Hal Gollop. A former Colombian soldier implicated in the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse last year will be deported from Jamaica to his homeland on January 3rd. This was announced by the Attorney General of Jamaica on Saturday. 43-year-old Mario Antonio Palacios is accused by the Haitian authorities of being part of a group of mercenaries that killed Moïse in July during an attack on his private home. His wife was also injured. Palacios was arrested in Jamaica in October and convicted of illegally entering the country from the Dominican Republic. The government of Jamaica had issued a deportation order for illegal entry into the country. Police say that Jamaica has no formal extradition treaty with Haiti, where Palacios is wanted. Jamaican police say that the information provided did not link him to the murder and essentially indicated that he was a suspect in an attempted armed robbery, without any detail. Police say that efforts to get more and better data from the Haitian government have not been successful. Palacios' lawyers have asked for his immediate release from a remand center, arguing his detention is unlawful. Palacios' lawyers and Haitian government officials have not yet officially commented on the matter. In Trinidad and Tobago, discussions are intensifying about the possibility of Carnival 2022. Newsday reports that country's Minister of Tourism, Culture and the Arts, Randall Mitchell, is expected to present a proposal to the Ministry of Health to consider a carnival-like celebration. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has already ruled out street parades, unvaccinated gatherings, and wild public parties. He has, however, said that there is room for safe zone venues for smaller versions of the usual large events. The Tourism, Culture and the Arts Minister says that after the proposal has been submitted to the Health Ministry, the Prime Minister will make a decision. The proposal will be submitted by the end of the week. Trinidad and Tobago ended 2021 with December recording the highest number of infections in a month, 20,538, and deaths at 711. The country also has 12 cases of the Omicron variant, although Delta remains the dominant strain. The British Virgin Islands Labour and Immigration Minister Vincent Wheatley has insisted that he is not against immigrants going to work in the BVI. At the same time, he says he is simply trying to ensure that locals have a fighting chance in the territory's labour force. Mr. Wheatley says he is aware that the BVI won't always find all of its labour pool from among its local population. He says that officials have to do everything they can to make sure that all locals are employed. According to the minister, there has been an uproar in the marine industry, but the minister again counters, saying there are local boat captains that are sitting down and not working. The BVI Labour Minister says even though there are problems with the Labour Department, it continues to work through its challenges. The minister says he has commended all the companies that have taken the initiative to continue to hire local staff and to give them opportunities and chances. He says persons have given him stories about locals not wanting to work and not showing up for work after being paid. However, the minister urged employers not to dismiss them. And now for the international news, the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Annual inflation in Turkey has surged to more than 36%, the highest in 2 decades. The Turkish currency lost nearly half of its value over the course of 2021. Victoria Craig reports.
Over the past year, the biggest increases in consumer prices came in categories essential to everyday life. Transportation prices surged by more than half, while the cost of food and non-alcoholic beverages and household equipment weren't far behind. The figures are the latest sign of the country's economic turmoil, which is making it difficult for individuals, families, and businesses to make ends meet. Adding to that pressure, last year the lira shed nearly half its value. That's despite efforts from the government to shore up the currency and promises from President Erdogan to protect savings accounts from currency volatility.
Sudan faces an uncertain political future following the resignation of its civilian Prime Minister. Abdullah Hamdouk was reinstated 6 weeks ago after being ousted in October's military coup. An opposition spokesman said that with his departure, the military had lost their last card for international recognition and popular support. Young people in India aged between 15 and 18 are now eligible to receive the coronavirus vaccine as the country records its sharpest ever weekly surge in infections. Cases almost tripled in the week ending on Sunday. Yogita Limaye reports from Mumbai.
India is in the grips of another wave of COVID-19. Mumbai is the worst affected city so far. Some restrictions have been put in place and civic authorities are appealing to people to wear masks and follow social distancing. At the moment, the number of people needing hospital care is low. But doctors say that if the virus spreads rapidly, even a smaller percentage of people needing medical intervention could overwhelm the public health infrastructure very quickly. More than 60% of adults in the country are fully vaccinated. This is a significant number given the size of India's population, but it still leaves hundreds of millions of people at risk.
Legislators in Hong Kong have taken their oath of office for the local assembly that's now been stripped of pro-democracy voices. Michael Bristow has this report.
I, Cheng Yuyan Tommy.
90 members, all of them approved by Beijing, pledged their loyalty at a ceremony that emphasised China's increased control over the territory. For the first time, they spoke in front of China's national emblem rather than Hong Kong's. There was chaos at the last oath-taking ceremony 5 years ago when several pro-democracy legislators staged protests while pledging their allegiance. This current crop of lawmakers were warned about the seriousness of the event and had a practice. So Monday's ceremony went ahead with barely a hitch, although 2 legislators had to repeat their oaths after making mistakes.
Michael Bristow reporting. World News from the BBC. The embattled Chinese property giant Evergrande has once again suspended trading of its shares on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange pending an announcement. The news came after Chinese media reported that Evergrande had been ordered to demolish 39 luxury apartments on Hainan Island because the structures had been built illegally. South Korea says the man seen crossing its heavily fortified border into North Korea on New Year's Day is believed to be a North Korean who previously defected to the south. Laura Bicker reports from Seoul.
South Korean troops were sent to investigate after surveillance cameras issued an alert that someone was roaming within the military border on New Year's Day. They couldn't find the man, but discovered he'd crossed into North Korea several hours later. The Defence Ministry in Seoul have said they're assuming the man is a North Korean defector who managed to reach the south in November 2020 by jumping the barbed wire fence. He claimed to be a North Korean gymnast. At that time, the South Korean military blamed a loose screw in its border sensors for his journey going undetected and ordered a review of its defences.
Local authorities in Afghanistan have seized around 3,000 litres of alcohol and dumped it into a canal as part of a Taliban crackdown. Video footage released by the country's intelligence agency shows agents pouring away barrels of alcohol seized during a raid in the capital, Kabul. Selling and consuming alcohol in the Muslim country was also banned under the previous Western-backed regime, but the Taliban are stricter in their opposition to it. The former Pakistan captain Mohammad Hafiz has announced his retirement from international cricket. The 41-year-old said he was proud to have been able to represent his country for nearly 2 decades, and he was leaving with great satisfaction and joy. Hafiz made his debut in 2003 as an opening batter, but went on to become one of the best cricketing all-rounders. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. One of the unions representing Guyana Power and Light workers has asked the Labour Ministry to intervene in a pay dispute. The President says the government and the private sector will be hammering out a strategy to cope with rising cost of living. And in regional news, Barbadians who are COVID positive or isolated at home will not be allowed to vote in general elections this month. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.